What's up, Gamer Nation? Heretic here, bringing you a kick-ass review for Deus Ex: Mankind Divided by Eidos Montreal, publisher Square Enix. Now, Deus Ex is one of those titles where the name carries so much weight. I mean, this game is based on, it's a prequel. It continues the prequel series of the Deus Ex franchise. It takes place 25 years before the original Deus Ex game, which was released back on PC and PlayStation 2 back in the early 2000s. And the reason why this game carries so much weight behind its name is because it has a lot to live up to, and the standards of video games have changed. And truthfully, it doesn't take much to, honor the roots of another game that has come before. But the reason why is because the original Deus Ex, the play style it provided, it gave you a series of challenges gameplay wise that you could pretty much play any way you want. It was freedom of play. It was non-linear gameplay, both in terms of gameplay and story wise. You had a massive amount of choice, and every choice that you make between what you talk to, the character decisions that you make, the actual gameplay choices that you make, everything had significant impact to the story at hand. And the story as well was great. It was the deepest thing I'd ever seen in a game, besides, Metal Gear, a couple other titles for that time. But it was truly a renaissance what this game provided for the first-person FPS genre. It was so deep and philosophical. It's just no game has ever come close to touching the original Deus Ex story. But here we have its sequel, or prequel for if you want to be technical. This game takes place 2 years after Human Revolution. You play once again as Adam Jensen. His mission is basically to uncover the truth. I hate to sound so general, but that's pretty much the gist of the story. There's a lot more that goes into it. There's a lot of complexity here still. I believe, in short, yes, this game, just like Human Revolution, does live up to the Deus Ex tradition of having, strong writing and strong gameplay, first and foremost. Okay, let me start off by saying Deus Ex, I think, in my opinion, for what a Deus Ex should be like, since I'm an old school fan, I think this game lives up to the original Deus Ex. However, it does still fall short, just like many modern video game franchises have, just in terms of quality and in one aspect or the other. And in this aspect, I think it is definitely the story that falls short. I don't think you can ever make a Deus Ex game and say the gameplay is bad, because the gameplay will never be bad unless you just set the game in a freaking hallway. But the story here, it's a little weaker than Human Revolution. I'd say it's more of a stepping stone to something greater, because the overarching story here, it basically has the same structure as the last game. Adam Jensen, there's an inciting incident, and Adam Jensen has to basically look into leads, chase down leads, do some detective work. But it's all handled so straightforward. There's very little twists and turns. There's no side characters that you can actually, you'll ponder about. I mean, there's a couple backup agents that you'll be interested in, but ultimately, the story's kind of one note. It does feel like you're going deeper into a rabbit hole, and it does feel like this game is just a stepping stone to setting up a fantastic final third entry for this modern franchise. You get name drops of characters from the original Deus Ex, like, Joseph Manderley or Robert Page. This game is clearly a setup story-wise to a finale, and it just feels like it's okay. There's not as many memorable moments as there were in the original Human Revolution. And the driving point for Adam Jensen and going deeper into this mystery, it is very weak. In Human Revolution, you were basically investigating an attack on your company, and it just so happens one casualty struck Adam Jensen personally close, and that was his girlfriend, who was supposedly killed in that attack. and it was just a strong driving point that connected both the player and Adam, and it was just more investing, and it connected with me more. Here, the inciting incident is just, oh, there was a terrorist attack, but you got to understand the story takes place in a time where augmented people and regular people with no augmentations are are competing and butting heads. And it's not that hard, because all this stuff's happening. It should be happening like this in the world anyway. It's nothing to get surprised about. When a bomb goes off in a train station, it's not as emotionally investing as the introduction in Human Revolution. The overarching story is forgetful here. I'm sorry to say, it could have been better. However, the side missions, the side stories that you will run into are way more interesting. They took full advantage of this premise of augmented people versus, natural people. And there's just so much more complexity when you see all this stuff firsthand. You'll be going through levels. You'll see people getting questioned by the police. You'll see people, augmented people, getting put down by other people. There's actual strife, and it feels so real when you look at it. You're just wandering down the street, and you're seeing these people. They're basically segregated. They are almost segregated, and I think it really hits home for me, basically. And I think that this game, out of the entire franchise, is the best representation of this world for what might happen if our prosthetics and our technology go a little bit too far and integrating a little bit too much into our DNA. And it brings about those classic Deus Ex philosophical questions about what it means to be human. And it's just awesome to get that feeling in a Deus Ex game. And no other Deus Ex game has truly visually, made that memorable. But this game does. It succeeds in that. And the side missions, like I said, going back, the side missions, you will be helping augmented people. You will be, I don't want to say you're a Batman, but you're basically doing favors for regular people on the street. And you're just interacting with them and learning their stories. And the way that everything is presented here is just so realistic. And I found that the side missions were definitely the best part of this game. Knowing the context of why people do what they do, what their intentions are on the street, how they live under oppressive conditions, by the police. Everything here was just so fascinating. And truthfully, I could have used a little bit more of that in the original Deus Ex. Even though, yeah, there were their moments, but they were small. And the representation here with modern day graphics is just so thoughtful, and it's just so much more invigorating. Now, the gameplay is pretty much the other half of the coin, the other half of the reason why you would go to a Deus Ex game. You're gonna be doing a hell of a lot of missions and going through a hell of a lot of scenarios. And honestly, it is glorious how much choice you have in this game. More so, I think, because of the level design is non-linear. You could go pretty much anywhere you want to go. You're still role-playing as Adam Jensen, and you're supposed to be this undercut Secret Service agent who's supposed to be low-key. Don't get me wrong. You're still confined within that role, but you can go a little off the rails and go on murdering sprees. This isn't Grand Theft Auto, but I'm just trying to illustrate here how many ways you could play this game. It's just wild. So the action goes back and forth between first person and third person using a cover system, and basically it gives you a whole host of tools at your disposal to use to, traverse through these environments, take down enemies. And what's great about this is you can go through the entire game without killing people, just like the last one. You can go through the entire game without being spotted or getting into any confrontations. When a developer can take their game and do something like that and give you true choice, that's just awesome. And this game, once again, it lives up to that tradition of choice. How are you going to play? How are you going to mold your own solution to get through this problem? It's just great. Again, this is an action game. or sort of action game, but I like to play it more as a detective game, to be honest. You can stealth your way through the sections, and or you can shoot your way through these sections, like an average shooter. But honestly, I would go more with the stealth option because you'll see more things. Um, you'll hear more dialogue that just makes the game seem so much more real. It fits within the character. But regardless of your play style, you can take your weapons, you can take your augmentations, and you can just run with it. I mean, if you want to go stealth, there's augmentations for stealth. You can use your Icarus dash to fly around levels, teleport from cover to cover. You can silence your feet so they don't make any sounds. Or you can just equip your Titan augmentation and just go full balls deep into the enemy, tearing up everything in sight. I mean, like I said, this game, it was designed specifically to cater to your play style, and that's just fantastic. This game definitely lives up to Deus Ex tradition on the gameplay side, which is choice. Now, I want to touch up on some actual practical gameplay elements like the level design. Oh my god, after the Doom 2016 remake, I think we are in a new era where, gamers are getting a little tired of the, throw me down a corridor with, 100 bad guys and just let me cap them. I think we're starting to see a shift from linear gameplay to non-linear gameplay. This game is an open world. It is not open world. It's open linear, meaning you can take whatever path you choose. And on that, there's just so many ways you can get around an area. If you're going stealth, there's always going to be a vent for you to uncover. There's always going to be a computer for you to hack, to turn off the cameras, to go straight down the middle. Action-wise, there's a lot of cover for you to utilize if you ever get into a fight. There's just no reason why you shouldn't be able to do something in this game. If you think one solution to a problem doesn't work, believe me, there's a few other options that are there in every area that I've experimented with for you to get around. I mean, if you don't have your Icarus landing equipment, you're going to be taking the stairs. But if you were smart and you invest in that Icarus landing system, you're going to get through the levels somewhat faster and in a different way. And obviously, this makes for great replay value. I cannot stress it enough. Every Deus Ex game that has come out has had tremendous replay value in its gameplay. If you take one, and obviously you can only take ultimately take one route when you're walking through these levels. There are at least 3 maybe per major gameplay area that you could take, alternate routes that just increase the longevity of this game. You will not see everything in one playthrough, I guarantee. And going back through these levels again on New Game Plus is just so refreshing because you're not constricted at all. You have your augmentations to help you around, to jump on ledges, to break through walls, to hack anything that you can that makes hacking easier. The game is just a blast the second time because you're pretty much the ultimate badass now. You know what how the game plays, and which route you already took, and you can experiment by doing it different. Now, every classic Deus Ex player knows that the very first playthrough of any Deus Ex game is going to be the best playthrough because you're just as clueless as any other player, new player, even if you know the mechanics. Like, what the hell do I do? I have so much choice. Which way do I go? Which augmentations do I choose to upgrade? Like, it's the first playthrough of any Deus Ex game is just the greatest because you are on the low level, you're kind of getting used to the mechanics, and it can be overwhelming because you have so much choice. Granted, it's still in a linear environment, a non-linear environment, but the game gives you so much choice that sometimes it's so stupidly simple. Like, if you don't have any augmentations to solve a particular problem, there's always a simpler task that that's just waiting to be found out. Sometimes you forget little things like, oh, you can manipulate the environment by picking up small objects and then stacking them to get to a secret area. That's like any game these days. It would just, give you a grappling hook and you just throw the grappling hook up there. Something so, so baby-like. I mean, this game does not hold your hand. It just expects you to use everything to solve a problem, no matter how complex or how simple. And I clap my hands when a developer does that. When they trust you enough to use your own brain and come up with your own solutions. I just admire that deeply, and I wish that more games would do it. Ultimately, in terms of features for the game, you have your standard single player mode, but this time there's a few other things, but that they've tacked on for value, and I use the word tacked on because that's what it kind of feels like. There's this other mode called Breach, which is basically a stripped down version of your single player gameplay elements. You know how in your single player you can use everything, but you also have to go through the story before you can get to those gameplay segments where it feels right, where you're fighting against terrorists and all these organizations, but you have to actually work your way there. Breach is pretty much just the core gameplay elements, hacking, shooting, stealthing, without the story elements. And they try to incorporate this backstory, like, yeah, you're a hacker in this neural sub network or whatever you want to call it, and this is basically a physical interpretation of your hacking skills, which doesn't really make sense, to be honest. Come on, who hacks like that? I mean, who goes into a virtual reality to do this? Basically, yeah, it does give a little value, but honestly, it is extremely forgetful. I did a handful of these missions, and it's just so forgettable. Like, I'm sorry, I just love the environments that they give you in the main storyline. It feels like you're in a world, not just a bunch of, challenge missions, because this is what these feel like. They feel like challenge missions, and there's even the freaking timer that they give on you. So, yeah, Breach is ultimately forgetful. You'll play a couple, and then you'll just as quickly forget about it. I mean, it adds value, thank you very much, but this is not the kind of value I wanted. And no, I hope they do not include some tacked on version of multiplayer in the future, because honestly, it does not need multiplayer. Don't give us that feature if you're just going to make it half-assed like Breach. In closing, I gotta say, for a single player game, and I am a single player advocate, like hardcore, I prefer something solid and intentionally designed as a solid, condensed, hardcore experience. There have not been enough games that follow this model. I mean, there are some developers out there like CD Projekt Red who put complete faith in single player games. There have been so many great single player experiences or some that just did not need multiplayer, that had that that raw edge, like The Last of Us had a great single player story that did not have tacked on multiplayer or anything like that. No, this is how I like my games. Not open world. If you're gonna focus on story, I suggest to all developers to go single player, short and sweet. More condensed than anything. I don't want, open world and, sparse. I want non-linear level design. I want strong storytelling in a more condensed, focused game. That's what that's what Deus Ex is. It's always had a focus because it focused on what needed to, the elements that it needed to. It doesn't create a huge sprawling open world with 200 miles of square gameplay or square area but with zero gameplay. No, games like this have more focus, and Eidos Montreal, it chose to, arguably they did choose to play it safe. In terms of structure, you're still one man going through one scenario with arguably a large amount of options to do it, but like I said, keep these games focused. Don't try to do more than what you should. Keep it short, concise, and strong. That's just my 2 cents on single player games. And even though they decided to include things like breach, I personally, it was just a waste of time. Thank you for the extra value, but ultimately it's something that's going to be forgotten, and something I just don't care about as a player, because I do my research in my games. I know what I want. I want a solid gameplay and a solid story when it comes to Deus Ex. None of this, none of these tacked on features that I'm not going to pick up, a week after I buy it, or the first couple hours after I try it out. No, that's not what I want. Keep doing what you're doing, Idols Montreal. And as a short message to Square Enix, which is the publisher, please don't do a Final Fantasy on this franchise. Deus Ex, it's one of those games where the original might be a little dated in terms of graphics and maybe voice acting, little things like that, but please don't make this into Final Fantasy where you're giving us one every year or every 3 years. Just give this game it's a solid trilogy, and then just please leave it alone. Don't make it any more games, because these games are fine as they are. Yes, there can always be improvements, but really, how much more can we improve in 2016 in terms of games? What are you gonna give? You're gonna give Adam Jensen the ability to wall run and a jetpack in Deus Ex Human Revolution 5 or whatever? No, please don't do that. Anyway, this game will give you your bang for your buck. Trust me on this. As it stands, yes, the main story is a little bit weak, but it does make up for it in terms of gameplay options and diversity of choice. This game is a full price buy for me, and I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Alright, gamers, so that's going to be it for my review. In terms of what's coming up, in terms of content, I really want to cool it with the reviews. I enjoy playing games. I love giving my thoughts and feedback on them, but they're not the most enjoyable videos to make. I had way more fun earlier in the year with what I was doing. I was doing my Raw Truth segment with my interviews with you guys on certain games that were coming out. I was doing montages back then, and honestly, I kind of miss those days. So, and the next few months in terms of games is kind of slow, to be honest. So that's going to give me more time to work on things. I'm actually working on new segments as well, but I'm trying to get the right format. I'm trying to bring more videos related to gaming news in general. Trying make a schedule to get those out every few days, because news is constant, but it is also hard to keep up with, and there's just a lot of things that I want to do besides reviews that I haven't had time to do. But ultimately, yeah, I kind of want to use them as an excuse to kick back a little bit, but it also gives you guys something to look into, and it gives you more diversity and choice in terms of interests. But that's gonna be it for my review, guys. Thanks for keeping up with the videos. Appreciate everything y'all do. Appreciate the support, and there's gonna be much more to come. This is Heretic signing off.